Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here at Activate Learn on Twitter. It is time for another book review. Now this time round, if you're a fan of history, if you are a fan of geography, if you are a fan of the beautiful country of Scotland, then this book is for you. And I'm talking about the Clanlanes Almanac by Sam Heughan and Graham McTavish, where they talk about some seasonal stories from Scotland. The book was published this year, 2021, and in fact I bought it from the bookstore. It wasn't out on the shelves yet, it was still sitting in boxes yet to be unpacked and put on the shelves. And as soon as I saw the cover and I recognised the two good looking blokes on the cover as the actors from that show Outlander, and a series that I watched and loved, as well as the fact that they had also recently done another series called Men in Kilts, where Graham and Sam travel all around the countryside in a camper van, sharing stories about Scottish culture, visiting castles, speaking to people about their history, and also having a bit of banter and challenging themselves to different sporting prowess, to get their sporting prowess up. So really interesting show. I loved the show. It was a bit of a laugh. And so when I saw the book, I thought I have to buy this because I love everything to do with Scotland. I love its history, even though it was bloody and violent, but I also love the fact that it is a country where people are so proud of their culture, their background, they keep their traditions alive. And to an Australian who sometimes feels as if, what's our traditions? I wanted to get this book. So this book also is an almanac. Now you're probably thinking, what's an almanac? I remember almanacs growing up when my mum used to buy them, and what they were was a collection of different information, facts, fiction, cartoons, horoscope, phases of the moon, planting guides for each month, and they were published every year, and she would buy one for every year. And now unfortunately the almanac always was in the toilet. Now that's not where I would put this book. The almanacs basically gave us, and you were somehow connected every season to what was happening in the world. So it's kind of like a little nugget of lessons or learning for that month, where you got stuff about what was happening in the month, any religious holidays, any festivities, any cultural events, years that famous people had been born or when they died, along with here different perspectives and the banter between Sam and Graham, recounting some of their own stories where, you know, in acting or childhood, and also some of their experiences. So it was a really good book to read. It's not a book to read in the one sitting. Not that you would read an almanac in the one sitting. You would definitely read it month to month to understand what was happening in that month. The book itself is fantastic. If anything, it gives you, recounts a lot of the Scottish history, which was bloody and violent to say the least. It's very different to English history, and in Australian schools they teach more of English history than they do of Scottish history. So sometimes when you're reading, this is how I find it, when you're reading Scottish history, your mind can't compute, because it's actually two different countries we're talking about. So what was happening in England and what we somehow understand more about the English history, something completely different was happening in Scottish history at the same time. And so if the Scots weren't fighting with each other, they were fighting with the English, and you had to also contend with I guess the different religious aspects to it. I loved reading about the clans and the tartans, and how there's still that connection to their background and their traditions. The book is a great read, and I would highly recommend it. And for me, I love this ideal almanac. I mean, I love to learn new things. I'm forever learning new things, and I espouse continual and lifelong learning in whatever format that you choose. So when I looked at this book, and in the form that they had put it in as an almanac, I thought it actually was a genius idea. As I think sometimes we're disconnected from time, and we're disconnected from our own history, and disconnected from what is happening around us. And an almanac actually kind of makes us focus in on that time element, and makes us focus in on what happened, you know, in January, what happened in that month. Historically, it kind of reconnects us to all sorts of things with regards to that month. And we don't hear about almanacs anymore. I could be completely wrong. If there's anyone out there who is an almanac expert, please let me know. Because for me, when I thought to myself, man, this is a really good idea to be able to pull together anything, whatever subject that you want to talk about, an almanac that recounts and actually pulls together the different aspects of that topic as it pertains to that time. And then that then places us into the middle for us to understand what has happened in the past and what we could expect in the future, if that makes sense. An almanac, for me, I thought is a fantastic idea, and I do wonder the applications, if I was to think about it in a learning sense. How could I incorporate in the future, maybe around the work that I do, creating some kind of an almanac? That was an idea that I came by reading through this book. The second aspect reading this book is, I know a lot of people when they travel, and I am a traveller myself. I've been to Scotland. I have loved every moment of being in Scotland, and I can't wait to go back there. The people are lovely. I love everything about Scotland, is that whenever I travel overseas and travelling through a country, I'll always be reading some book, history or its geography, to kind of understand the place. And by reading a book while you are immersing in that language, in that culture, in that country, kind of makes you understand exactly what you're dealing with. But at the same time, when you are traveling in a country, you are getting extra sensory overload. And sometimes, you know, in the quiet times of your hotel room, you just want to sleep it off. You want something a little bit lighthearted, but at the same time, you know, your brain is so full. Now, one of the things that I thought this would be a great way to do when you're traveling, read an almanac, read elements of it as you go through, to kind of understand it and pick it up everywhere. Whatever page you read, you just pick it up and read some aspect to it. So that's a second way, and a second, I guess, advantage of an almanac. The other way I also used to do when traveling is, if you can't read something like this because it is too much for you in the one time, I would highly recommend doing something else. Now, I know this is a review for this book, but for me, what I do is actually read, believe it or not, I read books like this. These are the Horrible Histories books. So while I was traveling around Scotland, I couldn't, because I was just having so much sensory overload, one of the things I wanted to understand is the history of it. And so by reading a Horrible Histories Scotland book, where, you know, things are in cartoons, they've got dates, years, and it's also written in such an amusing way, you tend to remember it a bit more. So when you remember things a bit more, you can then explore them in detail later on. And as I was traveling around Scotland, I would be reading this, depending on the areas where I was at, or the fields of the battles that happened. I would read it in here, and then I would investigate further, more in depth later on. As I was going through cities like Edinburgh, I would get the Horrible Histories for that city, read it, and it was quick, it was easy, and I remembered it simply because it was amusing. Now, these books are really children's books, but they're not really for children. Adults could read them and still have a laugh, and they are enough to get a teaser into the history of the place and the geography, the cultures, and the why, for you to explore a bit later on. So they're kind of like three lessons I gleaned from this book, the fact of the almanac being a way of being able to reconnect us in time with our history and events that are happening around us. Also, the idea of maybe almanacs now are a great thing to kind of be able to create for our own subject matter. And also the idea that when traveling, they would be really good ways of books to take with you, because you can instantly immerse yourself. But if you think this is too much for you, think of other ways of being able to learn history and of the place that you're visiting through much simpler texts and funnier texts that make you remember these. And simply, when you think about it, the value of these books are the fact of the stories. And they even say these are seasonal stories of Scotland. So through stories, you tend to remember the place, you get to appreciate the place that you're visiting, or the place that you want to go to. And these are all done as stories and amusing comics as well. So as you can see, these are the lessons I learnt from the Clanlands, the Almanac by Sam Heughan and Graham McTavish, and also the lessons that I could put into how they created this book, into incorporating what you can do for your own subject matter expertise to create some kind of connection to your past. Remember history a lot more, and have fun while you read. Okay then, thanks for listening and thanks for watching. Bye for now.